Hey everybody, this is Jason Jimenez with the Bold Saviors Making the Impossible Possible in Business. And today I have a very dear friend of mine by the name of Daniel Duncavage, who has come to our show today by way of Colorado. And I have to tell you that Daniel's been a very, very close friend of mine for many years. And he has been someone that I look up to in many ways, and someone who has experienced and has shared a journey that I felt compelled in inviting him to our show today. And so, Daniel, first of all, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, 100%. I want to start off by asking the question for the people who don't know who you are. Could you tell me a little bit about who you are, what's your name, and what are you up to at this moment?
Okay. So, I guess I'll take this kind of like as a resume kind of explaining of who I am, not like the deep inside. Okay.
Sure.
Right. So, I'm an engineering manager. That's probably the one sentence there. Okay. I'm a mechanical engineer, BSMS and that. And then 30 years I spent at NASA, Johnson Space Center in Houston, working on the International Space Station, a variety of different roles. I retired from that for some reasons I imagine we'll be talking about, and joined Sierra Space in Broomfield, Colorado. Sierra Space is a new space startup doing space stations, parts and supplies for other vendors, satellites, defense, stuff like that. And I went to support their space station program. And I've been in Broomfield now for about a year and a half.
You've been in what?
Broomfield, Colorado, which is right north of Denver, between Denver and Boulder.
Okay.
A really great little spot there. And at the moment, I am looking for a newer opportunity to grow and to do different things. Probably in space, but it doesn't have to be in space.
Yeah.
You know, the size and nature of the mission is important to me, kind of obviously. It's space stations and stuff like that. So space probably, but I think green energy is also really interesting and big, impactful thing that makes a big difference in the world. I mean, the world really needs this. That would be a really fun industry to be involved in next step. We'll see.
You know, when we planned this, when we had dinner the other day and we planned to come on the show today, I started reflecting on like, okay, how long have we actually known each other? It feels like eternity. So it feels like forever. But it's
12 years?
12, 15 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we met, were you at NASA?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about how did NASA come into your life and why did you say yes?
Oh.
Like, did you grow up saying, I want to be part of the space station?
No, I became an engineer because I wanted to be in racing. I wanted to be in Formula One. Because that was the pinnacle of racing technology and fast. Not just fast cars, but it was, you had to push yourself really fast to do things. I mean, you know, the next race is the next race and you better be ready and the other guys are competing and they're going to be faster than you. And so you have to innovate all the time and really, really think hard. That was the plan. I had no idea how to get there, though. Nothing in my universe was connected to this. University I went to, which was Northeastern in Boston, wasn't really related to any of that kind of thing. I had no idea how to get there, kind of meandering. And I went on an interview at this company, and it was a little bit like something out of The Office or Office Space kind of thing. I go into this company and they made switches. Just think of every buttons on the cameras here, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Catalog full of all kinds of switches, micro switches, big switches, all kinds of stuff like that. Not a hugely interesting kind of thing to be working on. And I'm interviewing with this guy. Now, you know, I'm in my 20s here, early 20s, and he's I don't know, to my college student eyes, he looked old, but he was probably 40, you know. And he's dead, but walking. And he's telling me about the company and what they do and the like. And I'm looking at him and thinking, an Animal House quote came to mind where John Belushi says, 8 years of college down the drain. You know, like, I don't want to do this. This guy's like, he goes to work and he's a zombie. You know, that doesn't mean that, you know, that everybody there was or whatever. That was the feeling I got. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
You know, I've evolved a lot of my thinking about organizations over time, but that was my feeling. And I'm like, what the hell? Went back in and I started doing a master's degree, which has its own little story about how that happened. And it was a little bit of a getting to kick the can down the road because I wasn't sure what the heck am I going to do here. I have no idea how to get into racing, no idea what path might exist there.
Yeah.
You know, this was all like the internet was just getting started. This was 91. And so it wasn't like it wasn't an easy way to find your way in, you know? And my brother, one of my two brothers, he worked at Naval Air Systems. Well, at the time, actually, he had already moved to NASA. So he was a Marine aviator, test pilot, stuff like that. And he was an engineer now at NASA. And he handed me a book that was about that the Bush 41 administration had commissioned from NASA, which is basically, why the heck do we have you? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Not like from an aggressive perspective, but give me a new vision to get behind.
Yeah.
And it was called The Vision for Space Exploration. It was about going to Mars and how and what we had to do and the challenges associated with it and all that stuff. And I read this and I went, I need to do this. I need to be a part of that. And so I wrote a letter. Well, no. So my brother then introduced me to somebody who knew lots of people, highly connected guy. And afterwards, he goes, now look, you need to write a thank you note. This guy's an executive. His time was really valuable. He gave you an hour. You got to write a letter. So I wrote this letter. In the letter, I wrote a line. I think I remember the line. It was that in 1969, the original Star Trek series was canceled because America didn't need fictional characters doing amazing things in space. We had NASA and our astronauts. But at the time, in the end of the 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of uncertainty about NASA. Back this second, there wasn't a lot of interest really, and NASA was kind of in a morass of what are we all about kind of situation. And then so I said, in the intervening years, we've lost our way, and science fiction's big business again. When our leaders choose to reverse this course, I want to be part of the organization part of the people that recreate the organization, something along those lines. Anyhow, it was cool enough that this guy liked it enough that he showed it to the NASA administrator, the boss of all of NASA. Administrator in a federal organization is like CEO.
Got it.
Okay. So he showed the administrator, his name was Dan Golden, and Golden said, this is really cool. And he used it in a speech that time, sent his staff off to make sure that it was accurate, that the timing was right, and I didn't just, wasn't totally wrong, and then used it in the speech. And then that resulted in me eventually getting hired. Because, then the deputy administrator goes, well, we should hire this kid. And I go, yeah, we should hire this guy. Now, my first clue that there was a problem here happened right there. It's like this. So you have a relationship that doesn't go well, and then you look back later and you go, yeah, I kind of saw that. Or, there was evidence. This was the evidence right here. The CEO says, let's hire this kid. Took 13 months for me to get a job. That should have told me the government wasn't going to move as fast as I wanted it to. Anyhow, so that's how I came to NASA. And then ended up with a job on the space station program.
There's so much there just in itself.
I don't know if you've ever heard that story.
That's our first time you've ever shared that to me. So just in itself, just in that experience, in retrospect, knowing that and bringing it up to light, what was the learning lesson that you could take away?
Well,
because there was a moment in what you just shared for that was you didn't know what you wanted to do. Someone gifted you a book.
A picture that I could, a vision. Yeah.
And then it inspired you in such a way that the process reminds me of something that one of my mentors shared with me years ago. He says that when someone feels lost and someone feels in a point of, I don't know what directions to take or don't know what the next step is, it's where you have to stop, completely be present to what's present. And whatever shows up, look at anything that inspires you, whether it be a spark or something that completely just takes over your body and just gives you energy. And then just jump until the inspiration, the energy, the emphasis fades away. And one of the greatest things that we get from that is that we had nothing to lose. You had everything to gain. The person who you were before that versus the person you are after that is not the same. You've learned more things. And if it fades away, there's going to be another spark, but it gives you a different perspective. And what you just shared with me was like that bolt of, because you combined it with Formula One, speed, going to the Mars isn't a slow process.
Very slow.
But the process to get there is slow. But the fact that the force that you have to get to Mars is immense.
Sure. Looking back on a lot of retrospect on this, there were two components here that I think play that are the learning journey for me. So the inspirational big idea was, as you stated, small in time.
Yeah.
And intense. And then the quote, small in time and intense, just, a couple of lines.
Small in time and intense.
Yeah. It's a point.
Yeah.
All right. But achieving anything isn't a point. It's a grueling process. Doing anything that matters is always a grueling process. I took a lot of the wrong lessons in the beginning. Let's make this a long beginning, decades beginning. That the inspirational big idea and getting an aha and being able to communicate something really awesome would be the thing that was really important.
Yeah.
It's not. It's the grueling process that's important.
Life lesson, by the way.
Yeah. So I was raised. This is funny. It's one of these things where you get a story that sounds like a really good story, but you don't see the seed of the problem in that, right? So I always told people I had a pretty easy life. I was raised kind of middle class and all that stuff. There wasn't all that. It was nice, My parents were fine. I mean, everybody's got issues. Everybody's got difficulties.
Sure.
Right? Nothing's absolutely bucolically perfect, right? So I never felt it was that big of a deal. And I was raised to believe that I was really smart, really important. I had to do important things. I had a responsibility to do important things. But that I was pretty freaking fantastic. All right. And so that's great. That's a high confidence kid. That's what you want, right? Now,
Yeah.
There's a seed of problem in there. It's called hubris and will bite your ass right off. Did mine numerous times. And then it get reinforced by me having a really big idea and getting a job at NASA, right? So it's like this big idea would be a thing.
Yeah.
And not necessarily the grueling part. And then when people don't get the next big idea, not understanding, you're like, why are you so dumb? This is obvious. Can't you see what I'm talking about? But convincing people to get on board is its own grueling process.
Sure.
It took me a very long time to figure that one out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I had the privilege of meeting your mother before she passed.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I remember sitting next to her at the table, at the dinner table, when you got married.
Mm-hmm.
Strong.
Yes.
Her look, and her when she looks at you, it was with intensity.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on it as far as your upbringing, with respects to, she empowered you to say that there was no limit with you, and with your brothers.
For sure, all of us.
Give me an example of that. Was it, hey, Daniel, you could do anything?
Oh,
Or was
no. We're really Catholic, so it was a responsibility to be the best, or else you're sinning. Slapping God in the face if you're not the best.
Okay.
All right. So I rebelled against all that shit.
Yeah.
All right. Which is why I was okay in school. It was all part of rebelling about stuff. Just getting away with just raw talent instead of putting the work in. A lot of that when I was young.
Did you know that?
I'm not sure whether
Let me put it this way. Did you know that you were already brilliant?
Well, I was told that since I was very young.
Okay. So okay, got
IQ
it.
test when I was 9 or 10, the big number came out of it. So yeah, you're the chosen one.
Got it.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was there. So I rebelled against being the chosen one, being lazy.
Yeah.
Not exactly a great plan.
Hey, man.
So yeah. So and that's the thing. So you get this interesting thing where you've got people that come from you consider Christina my wife, right?
Yeah.
Almost the exact opposite situation, as she grew up really, really hard and the like. And she sees all the difficulties that she had as a blessing, because it was this I don't know, gymnasium of toughness.
Yeah.
Right. So different kind of a thing. So,
Yeah. Talk about grueling.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And so you got a job offer into NASA,
Mm-hmm.
and where did you start?
Well, at Johnson Space Center in Houston.
Okay.
Part of the then new International Space Station program. So space station started in the Reagan administration in 84-ish. It was called Space Station Freedom. And it grew in scope and cost and slips and all this stuff. And there are lots of reasons for it, and not necessarily a finger-pointing thing. I think it was drastically underbid as how complicated this was going to be. And part of that, it's funny, I just realized this. So NASA probably had a little bit of hubris back then, because it pulled off this, flying to the moon and the space shuttle, which was stunningly complicated and amazing thing. And so we're so freaking awesome, we can do the space station in 8 years for $8 billion or something like that. Some very small, $2 billion. It's very small. Compared to what it actually ended up costing. A little overconfidence there. And then got into it, and you have a culture of second guessing every decision to really, really think, are you really right on every decision? And that just adds to the cost. And so that program got in bad shape and got canceled in 92 or so. Sort of. Basically, they went into a redesign phase. Let's rethink from requirement one. What are we doing? Why should we do it? And all that stuff. The program was basically canceled. I used to joke, and this is in the Clinton administration, so Clinton canceled freedom.
Right.
Anyhow, so then it was reformulated as the International Space Station. We already had the Europeans and the Canadians involved, but we added more Europeans than the Japanese and, crucially, the Russians. Big story about why that happened and all that. And so, to start with the Russians, we created a joint program to work with them, to fly some cosmonauts, and we'd fly some astronauts. They had a space station called Mir, smaller and much less capable than the one we built with them later. but functional and did some great stuff. So the idea was to fly up to Mir, put an astronaut in Mir, do some research and all this kind of stuff. And there was a contract for $400 million to do this. My boss was the manager of that contract. It's called ISS Phase 1. And he had me in there to be kind of his liaison to the research community, the science community.
Okay.
Mission Science Working Group was a group specifically. So it's kind of being a contract negotiator. Which the contractors are.
Was this around the time when I remember you and Christina were flying to Russia and
This
different?
was 1994, 1994 to 99.
Okay.
So way before any of us met.
Okay.
But I did end up being involved in the Russians again later.
Got it.
So I went to Russia in the 90s and then again in the teens.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I started, was doing that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider that was an already existing skill set?
No.
So how'd you learn it? How'd you learn to make, because you've been in part of some extremely complex, huge decision-making conversations that have, in my world, from the outside, would be as impactful to just humanity in as far as where we are today. At least that's how I see you.
Mm.
And so were you just kind of dumped in and say, I think you could do it, go ahead and do it?
Sort of. We did have a training class on cross-cultural understanding and stuff. It was a couple days. My boss and his deputy had been there and had worked with the Russians so much, so they had some points about how to deal with this.
Yeah. Because everybody's got an intention.
For sure. And understanding Russian culture being very different than American culture. One of the things I remember from the training was Russia is more Oriental, East Asian, than it is Western. And that means that the society is very context based. So business and deals get done if you really know the person. I know your family. I know where you come from. Where you come from, like your nationality matters. And whatever, that kind of thing.
Sure.
It's sort of tribal, if you will. Different way of thinking, whereas on the Western, it's like on the merits of the thing and trying to divorce itself from the person. So like two American businessmen will come to a table to discuss something, and each one has a briefcase full of trust that I'm assuming the system is going to work and the legal system's going to work and all that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And we're going to get right down to business kind of a thing. Whereas the Russians sit down with, I have no idea who you are. Get to talk to you. Okay, here's one grain of trust. And you keep working, you get another grain, you get another grain, you get another grain. It takes a while to build that up. But once you built it up, it's a strong foundation of trust. But you got to build that over time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had to learn that part. That and that this kind of American win-win, everybody wins kind of thing, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense and just sounds like you're weak.
Yeah.
But you can do a little of it. But you got to be careful with that because it just sounds like you're giving it up. Then you got to fight for a win. I had also previously been trained on how to sell cars. It was a job in college. It's terrible salesman. I'm awful at that. But I did learn something, and I remember this point, that it was the deal the person thinks they get that makes them happy.
Yeah.
So even, sales way better than I, so this was new to me, this idea that the actual number that they bought the car for is way less important than whether they fought for it. Someone could pay less, but get it easily and feel like they got ripped off. Nonsense to me. I still don't understand that concept, but that's a reality. So I took that into these negotiations. So there's got to be a bit of battle. Okay. So you have this big thing, and we're all shaking hands and drinking vodka and doing all this stuff about international collaboration. We're not in the Cold War anymore. This is awesome. And then the person sits down and completely lies to you about something. No, we don't have this data. We can't produce this. It's ridiculous. And you should, this is a good enough deliverable. And then you got to battle kind of through that.
Yeah.
Call that bluff, if you will.
Yeah. Do you feel that because of those experiences, well, let me back up and say, do you feel that in today's world, that you could take someone who wants to give you just a grain of trust over time that could take years? Mm-hmm. Do you think, knowing what you know now, can you expedite that within an hour? Maybe a day? Is that possible?
I don't know. So I'm really American. All right. And I'm really Mr. Optimism. So I kind of assume the best all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to be pessimistic and remind myself that this guy might be lying to me. I really have to try.
You look so nice.
Yeah, I know. It's just, that's not my natural.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, when people ask me about, when I introduce you, I always say, Daniel for me is an individual that has made an impact in this world in such a way that most people just don't know the people behind the people. That he is the individual who helped create or had a participation in making sure that the equipment and the technology within the rockets and the spaceships and everything that got people from Earth to the moon and to the space station possible. Because without him and the people he worked with, we wouldn't be in today's economic state when it comes to space exploration. That's who you are for me. That's a real big thing
It's a
for me.
little bigger than I am for who I am for myself. So I like your vision though.
And so I share that because when you hear me say that versus what you actually did and what you perceive yourself as, I want the audience, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what did you actually do?
Okay. This is an interesting point that you bring up here because I am such a Sergeant Joe Friday, just the facts kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, accuracy of a story to precision is who I am, which is really not inspiring. You will tell an inspiring story that actually that'll move things. That's part of the journey of me. I'm trying to learn how to do that kind of thing. I'll just give you the executive summary of something, and it makes sense, but doesn't really kind of move you. There's a great podcast called Hardcore History. It's really cool. And he was talking about talking about the Middle East 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, Hittites and Assyrians and all these guys. And he was talking, the Babylonians were really dry. They would say something like, and so the king invaded the realm of the somebodies, and there were 5,000 casualties, and we took 800 pounds of gold. Say that, and the Assyrians would be like, lo, I came upon thee, all I slew. And it's a totally different way of describing what happened. I'm much more like the Babylonians, like account. So I got to learn to be more Assyrian, I guess. So what I did, I started out doing that stuff, the contract stuff with the Russians, which was super interesting, and I got a hilarious story to tell you on that one. Then certifying some hardware to fly on space station to troubleshoot some data buses, the computer system stuff. Basically a backup in case we had a problem in our first flights. Didn't end up having that problem. But then ended up using it for something else that was unexpected. And that worked out nice. That's where I got my Silver Snoopy, which is it's an award given by the astronaut office for doing something that increases crew safety in an important way.
Okay.
And then that was pretty cool. I managed to certify hardware really fast. That came from going through the organization. So a big organization will have stovepipes organization, line organization. So you'll have engineering, and inside engineering, there's electrical engineering, and inside that, there'll be the power system guys, and then the electromagnetic interference test people, and all these different orgs, and they have their own processes that are vertical, going down to look at an org chart like that. But then doing a project, any project goes this way through the organization. And people in the org will know their part, and maybe this side and that side, who they talk to, but they don't know. And the processes are documented this way, not documented that way.
Why do you think that is? And
Because
would you
that's
change
what org chart does.
But how would you change that? Knowing that now?
Yeah, you have
Because military, speaking to one of your brothers at one point in time, he mentioned to me years ago that your private first class knew the mission. And if someone above them, if somebody would pass above them, there was always someone that could take their place because they knew what that next step was doing.
Yeah.
So how do you...
Okay. Two answers to that. So the way I did it in that case was the normal way you did it was you would have a requirements document for what you were going to do. I'm going to certify this doohickey to the NASA standard, blah, 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 blah. I'm always talking together. You make a thing, a huge document tree and all the requirements and stuff. It's a systems engineer. And then you give that to the engineering director, and they go, okay, what do I got to do? All right, these guys have to deal with it. Those guys have to do something. And then each group gets a little task of figuring out how much work it's going to take to get this thing done. And then it spits out on the other end weeks later with it's going to cost X dollars and cost Y and Y months. And the number at that, it was like a year. It's going to take to do it. What I did instead is I said, okay, who's the first thing? And I went and met that person at their desk. What do I need to do for you? Well, you need to do this, got educated and the like, and come in from the perspective of, I got this thing I'm trying to do. It's kind of impossible. Help me. That's really a good way to start. And then they know the next person. And then you kind of go through it as an individual that is the thread all the way through. No handoffs. See, when you hand it off, now you've got to get the context again. Now I got the whole context from one end to another.
Yeah.
Did a lot of this kind of stuff. And so got done in 12 weeks instead of 12 months. Not because it was any sort of magic or I was super fantastic. It was just because personally asking a person who's the next thing in line to tell me what the next step is.
Not complicated, very simple, but I think rarely done.
Yeah. Because the organization gets built to do a thing.
Yeah.
Scale causes this problem. Scale and age. It's one of the reasons why small companies operate fast, because they're always going cross-cutting. But then you end up getting larger, and now you have to have established forms of communication because you end up with chaos. So you grow up and then become stuck and concretized. And then how do you undo that? So part of my answer is projects that go this way, have one person go through there. My second answer to you is, and this is related to what Tom was telling you about commander's intent and stuff, which is what he was getting at. My opinion, there's two management structures that I think can meet this requirement. And I had some experience doing this. Later on, I ran a software team, and we built lots of software that went on station, crew interface stuff, and medical operations and things like that. That stuff was all non-critical, meaning, if the email didn't work, nobody dies. If the exercise equipment didn't communicate correctly, nobody dies. That's nice because it allowed me to be very innovative all the time, because I didn't have this, you have to be 100% sure you can't hurt anybody thing.
Yeah.
It allowed faster innovations, what I like to do. So I got to experiment with different structures.
I gotta take a pause for a second.
Yeah.
You just said something that brought me back to who you are and how you were brought up. You were brought up and you stated that I am limitless.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that role put you in a place where you really had no limits.
Yeah, I got to do things most people in NASA didn't get to do. I could invent my own processes, which you don't normally get to do.
Yeah.
Right management who's willing to let me run with it. And that was really cool. And so I tried different things. And the two pieces that I came to were a thing called Scrum and a thing called Objectives and Key Results. So Scrum comes out of software, and it's a teaming mechanism wherein a product owner will say, I want these features. Well, again, if it's software, it might be, they're called user stories of, I want, the user wants to be able to click on this and get that and get their bank balance just this way or whatever. Yeah, some features, some story of how the interaction is going to happen with the software. And they'll have this big list of these things called a backlog. And the product owner then prioritizes, this is the thing I want first, second, third, more important, less important down the line. And then the team looks at all these chunks of work and says, I think this chunk is a small job. This is a medium job. That's an extra large job. This is huge. We're going to need to break this one down in sub pieces. And they score how big those are. And then they take a block of time, 1 to 5 weeks, and they say, we're going to grab this chart and put it on their board. We're going to get this done in this 3-week section, and nobody can bother us. Leave us the hell alone. Go away for 3 weeks. And they go work for 3 weeks, and they get these things to a done state. And then they have a meeting at the end and show the boss, hey, done. This is what we did. All right. This is what we didn't get done. These are the problems that you could help me fix. This is what I need to be able to do better, and brainstorm process improvement, and then go do it again. Those are called sprints. And it then empowers these individuals because they're picking from this list. And there's a dialogue now of priorities versus amount of work. And since they've scored the list and they've picked it, they own this sprint board. It wasn't imposed on them by management. They chose it in relation to management. And so there's a personal accountability attached to that. And then the team every day meets for a 15-minute stand-up meeting to discuss amongst themselves without management what their status is, what's going well, what's going poorly, what did I do today, what am I stuck
Did you say every 15 minutes?
A 15-minute meeting once a day.
Once a day. Okay, got it. Morning or afternoon?
They choose. Whatever works for them. And that Scrum meeting has a couple of things. It keeps things going. It keeps the team cohesive.
Yeah.
It also creates peer pressure because you don't want to be the guy as I had to do shit yesterday. Be that. So, and you want to also be able to, somebody runs into a problem, you want to help them.
Yeah.
So there's this team cohesive, a little bit of peer pressure to do better. And I saw this really helped. It took the super producers and made them feel better because really high-end stars, they're always doing great. You don't have to help them per se. You got to just get out of their way most. But at the same time, they're like, Jason kind of blows. He's not doing a lot. That irritates him.
Yeah.
But in Scrum, it takes the people in the middle and kind of moves them up a bit. They work harder. And they're more clear on what they want because clarity is a big piece of it. Big organizations, people spend a lot of time not really sure what the priority is now or waiting on somebody else's decision or whatever. Scrum really speeds it up. But it's super tactical. You'll get a great team that'll build something that you don't need at all.
So is there one person within that moment that is taking lead of that? Or is it just literally the process of, okay, it's 11 o'clock where, everybody shows up and someone just starts talking?
There is a role called Scrum Master. They're kind of a process owner, master of ceremonies.
Okay.
So they kind of MC the thing, facilitate. If there are problems outside the team, like I can't get this department to give me an answer, he goes and
Got it.
tries to do that. So he's a facilitator, not a manager, a servant.
Yeah.
Facilitator.
Yeah.
So there's the product owner, the scrum master, and the team. So this is a great tactical thing, but it's not connected to anything. It's by itself.
Yeah. It's totally internal.
Right. So now you say, okay, how do you take an organization and guide it? Okay. Well, I'll start that. So this is the lowest level of abstraction, the user story on the Scrum board, the sticky note that you got to move over when you get into done, test and all that. Well, what about the total opposite end? So vision statement of company. One of the hardest things a company can do, because most of them are terrible. But think about ones that are great. All right. Take Google. It's organize the world's information to make it instantly accessible. That's their vision statement, or at least was at one point. Look at Apple. It's empower the creativity of an individual. Microsoft. It's empower small business with all the power of a large business. When you think about what those vision statements do, Apple is totally focused on creativity of an individual. Their stuff is beautiful. Their stuff is super easy to use. You don't have to be a technical person to use it. And they don't really give two shits about about an IT department or corporate infrastructure.
Right.
Microsoft is all about empowering that IT division of your company, your little company, to be able to do anything. So that's their customer. A really different way of doing things. Both valid. Google, look at all of their stuff. None of it's pretty. It's really basic, but it's lightning fast.
Yeah.
Look at Gmail. It's kind of awful, but it's really fast. It's really lightweight. Works. So that guides them. So that's super high level. And then how do you go between the two? Well, you got directional things. So the Apple one then comes down to what does beautiful look like? Simple, clean. The original iPod had no off switch on it, that kind of a thing. The interfaces are amazing because that's the direction of what they're trying to do. Now, how do you connect these two things? And that's where objectives and key results come from. And this is where I'm going to start answering the question of how you go through an organization. Objectives and key results came out of Intel under Andy Grove as a development of Drucker's management by objectives. And you take an objective at high level, and then you create some set of measurable, and the objective has to be objective. So you have to be able to look at it and evaluate whether it happened or didn't. And then the key results would be the things that, if true, the objective true. So example I have off the top of my head from Space Station is you could have had, and Space Station wasn't doing this, I was trying to get this infused. You could say, okay, we want to increase the amount of science output of the space station by 30% in a year. Okay. Key results. Increase the number of hours of crew time spent on science by 20%. Increase the number of new principal investigators doing research on the space station by 20%. Reduce the time period of certifying a new payload to be safe to fly by 15%. Something like that. And then, so below, now you look up and say, I'm a software company, I'm a software group that is crew interfaces. Okay, how do I help that objective of more crew time for science? How much time is the crew spending troubleshooting the printer or some stupid thing like that? How many steps are in a procedure to do a thing? All right, so I'll make the objective of reduce crew steps for my system by 50%. And
the impact that would have.
Right. And then, okay, so that's my objective, or, reduce the amount of crew time spent maintaining my system by 50%.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to reduce maintenance times. I'm going to make things that fix themselves or, be able to see it on the ground or fix it from the ground. I'll make some set of key results. And then the software team below then says, reduce the number of steps associated with configuring the network Okay, then their key result, their objective is build a automatic domain join software or something. So you see, you got this direct all the way down, and it can make sense. And now you're a person here that sees this vision up top and understands that this is related to that. That's the strategic alignment mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I did this in my team, my groups of 35 engineers, and then all the different groups that are associated with. And it worked. All of a sudden, people really, it fixed a manager's problem, which is where you're constantly trying to make sure all of your people have enough work and know exactly what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't have to know everything.
No.
You just needed to be able to embrace the people so that they could be themselves, to give you the data, to orchestrate.
Yeah, and then you lead the team in the discussion to create, and the team's writing their own OKRs. Again, they get ownership. And it's grueling. The first objective we wrote took an hour and a half of debate with 10 people in the room to get that first one-line objective right. An hour and a half, partially because we're all learning and figuring out how to do this. Then later it got better. But yeah, so...
Especially when people got to know each other.
Oh, they already knew each other.
Okay.
In this particular case, there's two different groups that were kind of aggravated at each other as part of it. And it was process group. So I had a group that was just about process.
Yeah.
To get this stuff together and figure out why we're all screwed up. So, yeah. But still, it takes a while. So, these objectives are not easy to write.
No, and what it also brings up for me is that there was an element of making sure people actually liked each other. And when they didn't, or when someone didn't do their part, making sure you kept everybody with a smile.
Yeah. I've had a lot of fortune because I was working in space, where you never had to worry about motivation. Everybody really wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's this having mission. I've never had to struggle for that. I've never been in an organization where mission was uninspiring or seemed uninspiring. You could create inspiring mission probably anywhere, but this is not an area that I know about. I've just happened to work in a field where that was the easy part.
And so, how long were you in NASA?
Just shy of 30 years.
And within those 30 years, what has been the most significant thing that you would consider for yourself that you were able to accomplish or that you experienced? And I think there's maybe two questions in that. What you accomplished and then what you experienced that whether you were proud of and or that you took away as, I will never do that ever again.
Never, well, the latter is the easy one to answer. How I tried to make change was really wrong. It didn't work.
When you say try to make change as change within NASA? Okay, so from a big picture perspective.
Yeah. How to influence cultural change. All right. It got better as time went on. I was young, as we used to say, full of piss and vinegar. You start out by saying, this is stupid, stop being an idiot, we should do it this way. It's really unacceptable.
You can only push the rope.
But as you get older, you should learn a completely different way and not just become more elegant at doing that.
Yeah.
Being more elegant at doing that it works better, but not great.
Yeah.
You can get people on your side to agree on some things, but not enough to make the difference. Figuring out when you're trying to make a change through an organization, each sub-chunk of the organization has their own things that they're worried about, things that bother them, things that they see as the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And their traditions. That's like a lot of traditions. So I'm doing it a long time. Some of them can be hard to understand why this tradition is still in place. It just seems so backward. And Sometimes that's probably true. So understanding where those come from to try to apply to that, looking at it more like you're selling.
Yeah.
All right. That's the way to do it. The way I didn't figure out until much later. And even still, it was really difficult to get to there, you know. And I was also, at that point, pretty well known as the guy to say, this is stupid, we shouldn't do this anymore. So I had to kind of fix my own marketing.
It's interesting because when you say that, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, here comes Daniel.
Yeah. You gotta, you know, kind of reinvent your image, if you will.
Yeah. Which, that can be taken in two different directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if, because of the way you were,
Mm-hmm.
and what you're saying that I won't do that again because it was a learning thing, if that was also the gift that you gave to them.
Maybe.
Because they didn't see that as that was causing an issue or problem.
Yeah, you know, when you're
Taking politics aside.
yeah, if I were to go back and say, all right, there are a lot of things that get done in NASA, and I imagine in other big, older, successful organizations that you have to provide on an individual basis a sufficient amount of honor to that before you get started.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't do.
Got it. So what about what is that one thing that you walked away with saying, I did this?
These are always hard things for me.
I know they are.
Because I always, you know, if the answer isn't I landed on the moon, it was zero. You know?
Yeah.
And then I got to stop and go, this is not zero, Dan. There were good things here. But, you know, it wasn't, you know, you didn't, you know.
All right. So let me ask you in a different question. Because I'll tell you, even just with what you shared today, and as long as we've talked and everything that we've done for these last some odd years, to someone who is not Daniel, to someone who is from the outside, what would you think would be the one significant thing that you either did or that you impacted or changed in NASA?
Yeah.
That someone would see as audaciously bold,
Yeah.
impactful.
Probably Arcturus, which is a system we built. I got my medal for that one.
What medal was that?
Silver achievement, silver leadership medal, I believe was the formal title of it. And it's literally a medal you're wearing, kind of thing, you know. And it was for leading this change. And almost all commanding and telemetry that goes back and forth to a spaceship is done in the way of thinking of avionics. Avionics is the stuff that's running the airplanes that are flying perfectly all the time and never fails. Avionics software, you got to be perfect because people die if you don't. It's not like, you know, if this iPhone over there stops recording, that nobody dies, right?
Yeah.
So you can make mistakes. So you can have a totally different process and way of doing things. So avionics has to be done a very certain way, and it's really expensive. You're talking like $1,000 per line of code. All of the verification you got to do, and it's really complicated for good reason and developed over time. Whereas whacking out a new app that you're going to throw on on the App Store, $2 a line or something like that. The problem is when you're trying to be perfect, if you want to be perfect before you take a step, that's really expensive and takes a long time. And then you build structure around this to be that way. It's expensive, takes a long time, so it's really hard to innovate. That's the problem with avionics command and telemetry stuff. So we invented a different way to do command and telemetry using much more normal internet-y kind of thinking. and were able to then, so NASA was trying to build technology demonstrators to put on space station to try a new environmental control system, a new thing that would scrub CO2 out of the atmosphere, things like that. And you don't want to wait a year and a half to integrate it into the critical systems. But there was some safety critical stuff on this. So how do you do it? And how do you get the commanding from the ground and the telemetry back and leave all of the really critical people die systems unimpacted, but be able to do this, building that system? It became so popular that we had to increase our number of people to support the thing, because all kinds of customers inside of NASA came to go to the system immediately, because it provided so much capability and so much of a picture of what could be done in the future. And we built a lot of it almost as if it were a critical system. It was extremely reliable. It had a lot of command validation to make sure that only the correct command came through and it couldn't be spoofed or couldn't be hacked and all this kind of stuff. It's a great system. And that was meaningful, because then it allows space station to be used faster, better for future things. And the concept of how to put it together and to create a thing in between this avionics world and this internet-y kind of world, this thing that was in between, was what this was. In the avionics land, if you make a change, you might cause a risk. Any change to a perfect system might break the perfect system. So that's expensive. The risk comes from change. But in the internet world, not changing creates a risk. And you're a businessman. If you don't change, your competitors do, and you lose.
Yeah.
So not changing is a risk. Okay, so those are two totally different ways of thinking. Okay, so we had to put in the thing in the middle. And I tongue-in-cheek named it the domain adapter node. So these two domains of thinking, and you're a node in the middle. It's adapting between these two domains. That was kind of a joke in my initial presentations on let's go do this thing. You know, it's the Dan.
The Dan effect.
It was the Dan. And Space Station has a bunch of Dans now. And it stuck. I didn't expect it to stick. It was a joke to begin with, but everybody just started calling it the Dan. The Dan box is known far and wide in NASA. So
That's beautiful. I love it. And I never knew that. And you also shared something that I didn't know. And I absolutely can see how you've just shared with me that you have won 2 different awards while your time with NASA. One of them was with the Snoopy, was it?
Silver Snoopy, it's called.
Silver Snoopy. Yeah. The other one was this medal that you just acknowledged.
Silver.
What was it called?
Silver Leadership or Silver Achievement.
What other?
I'm probably supposed to know that.
What other awards or achievements did you achieve, or did you receive while in NASA?
Lots of lesser ones, group achievements and things like that.
Okay.
I was involved in.
But those are the 2 significant
Those are the
ones.
2 big ones.
Okay.
And those are pretty big. I should be proud of it.
You should be proud of them.
Yeah.
And shame on you for not telling me ever. That's awesome, man. 29 years, 28 years into NASA. And you came about looking into something different. Mm-hmm. What transition? What created that?
Well, I had never planned on being there a long time. Like 10 years and then go out into industry.
Yeah.
Go do something great, make $1 million. That was always the plan.
Yeah.
And I'm staying longer, partially because some of the things I tried to do, I didn't do as well. You know, I did some real estate with some goods and bads and that. And, tried to create an internet startup back in the .com era. It's called AskARocketScientist.com. It was a pretty good idea. It was an educational kind of website thing. And its main issues were twofold. One, I didn't know what I was doing. And two, it was literally, we were launching this just as the dot-com crash was happening. So it was a couple of years too late, or a couple of years too early. It was bad timing on that one.
Yeah.
Fine, I got to learn a little bit. Didn't cost much. And then through time, trying different things outside of NASA, I came to realize that I'm not an entrepreneur. I really kind of thought that that's what I was. But understanding an entrepreneur is basically an Energizer bunny that is really good at sales and operating all by themselves. You've got to have those core competencies. I'm in relation to other people. I'm a leader of teams and organizations that exist. But this is a different skill set. When I finally realized that skill set was really the skill set of me, and I stopped trying to do something I actually wasn't good at, that's when I decided to go ahead and find a job in the industry.
So what if someone were to say, I have this concept, this idea that will make an impact. It's inspiring me. It's motivating me. Mm-hmm. I want to be able, there's a gap in the market and they don't have that skill to being the entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. What if they found someone who can do that, give them the role and the title to take it and run with it while being able to own it, while being able to participate in it and influence it from the inside to run the operations, the teams, and the process?
Like
would that be different?
Sure, that's partnering,
Would that change that perspective?
Sure. Okay, so let me try to contextualize it this way. It's a great book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, written by Ben Horowitz. Awesome book. No, he did a bunch of great things. He was part of the group that created Netscape, which was the original browser, all that kind of stuff. And then a company called LoudCloud became Opsware. And he's now a VC. And in this book, he talks about one of the problems that companies have as they're growing, because a very small company that's a startup, few people, half a dozen people, dozen people, although there's thousands of people are. These stages are radically different things.
Yeah.
And the person that's great here is the number of people that are a good CEO to begin or whatever, and great once you've achieved 20,000, the Bill Gates, Jobs, Zuckerbergs, and they're 1 in a million people.
Yeah.
Extremely rare. Even when it comes to really good startup people, there's very few that are good at both of those things. They're good here, but they're not good there. Or they're good there, but not good here. Mm-hmm. Because it's a different thing. He described, like, a company will be growing and maybe it's 70 people. And they'll hire a VP who's a real high flyer in some big tech company. This guy's a VP someplace, he's doing great, he's known. They bring him in, give him a title, a bunch of money and all that stuff, and he doesn't seem to be worth anything. Sitting in his office not doing anything. It's because in a larger organization, that person has somebody scheduling them, and they are back-to-back on meetings of everybody's coming to them to ask them questions, to solve problems, or to make decisions. It's driven from the outside into that person. That person has a lot of pressure, and it is a specific skill set. You've got to be good at it. Whereas the company that's got 30 people, you're a bunch of Energizer bunnies inventing work to do. Now, chasing the work around. You're chasing the work. This person, the work is chasing them. They've got to be really good at prioritizing, making hard decisions that impact big things, shouldering $100 million decisions. That's a different skill set than this person. I realized I'm that guy, not this guy. Because I'm really comfortable in that world and really comfortable in between two groups that are arguing with one another. And have all kinds of reasons and maybe history behind them. I'm very comfortable inside of that. Okay, well, then that's what I should do because I'm good at it and I like it and I'm comfortable at it.
100%. That gives, in a sense, a huge weight off your shoulders of, Okay.
I kept trying to make myself into this guy.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I love it. And to be able to come to a conclusion of saying, okay, is this what it is? Okay. Love that.
So figuring out who you are. So to answer that question, you figure out who you are, and then what is the size of the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So therefore, how big of an organization is needed? I have some service that I want to create that does something locally and could be built small and grown. Okay, that's something I can start with a small startup.
Yep.
I have a really awesome innovation for how to build a new rocket engine. My brother's working with a company that's doing that right now. This doesn't happen with 5 guys and $100,000.
Right.
You better get, buckets of millions
Yeah.
to design that. Okay. It's a different size organization you need.
So you're touching on something that at the surface in the last couple minutes, 15 minutes or so, you've touched on something that I've been wanting to bring up that I know that is very important to you. Because I think at a foundational perspective has influenced how you work, manage, deal with, and even made the decisions you've made. And that's the topic around culture. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
What is it about?
I'm gonna mention another book by Horowitz called "You Are What You Do." Really good book on culture. So culture is the sum of written and unwritten processes and daily interactions and norms of behavior in an organization. And so it becomes the context and perspective to which people deal with everything that they're going to deal with. And it gets built on a personal level. Day to day, you have to be interacting with these things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Companies try to change their culture with proclamations and big ideas and stuff like that, which is a component of it for sure. But that doesn't get it done on the end. What gets it done is exhaustive work on the specifics of the processes. One of the things I really liked about Scrum and OKRs, you interact with them constantly. You interact with Scrum every day.
Mm-hmm.
So how you make that, and then this team creates its culture because of the interaction every day with it. And then you do objectives and key results. I would inject OKRs into every sprint review. So this was not a quarterly goal planning thing. Well, yes, quarterly you do the goals, but you interact with the goals every single sprint, every 2, 3, 4 weeks, however long your sprint chunk is. So you would go ahead and get done with the work you're doing, and then you'd evaluate how far am I along on these key results, and the team scores it themselves. That's a cultural thing. The team is making their goals and measuring their goals internally to themselves. It's reported, but they're choosing for themselves what it is. So you have to interact with it all the time. One mechanism is adding a rule that is surprising and gets encountered frequently. 2 examples on that. First one, a lot of people may have heard about the New York Giants back when they were lousy and Tom Coughlin took them over. 2000s, early 2000s. They ended up winning the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
He made this rule that said that if you come to a team meeting less than, I want to say 5 minutes early, that counts as late and he fined you $100 or something like that. So you would run into this every single day. It was odd. Why isn't on time equal on time? So you have to ask the question, why am I doing this rule? And so you run into it, and it starts to create a something. The something it was trying to create was overperformance. That was the point of it. The other one was from the book. It was about Toussaint Louverture, who led the only successful slave revolt in history, and the existence of Haiti is the result of that. Amazing individual. And he had, I don't remember his full name, but it was something like you weren't allowed to cheat on your wife if you were an officer or something like that. Which, especially throughout armies throughout history, I mean, raping and pillaging is what armies did. So, throughout all of human history until pretty darn recent. It was a surprising role, which to us doesn't seem like a surprising role, right? Don't rape anybody. It's not a surprising role.
Yeah.
But, a couple hundred years ago, conquering army, that was pretty common. For 1,000 years, common. But they had to run into it a lot. And it was about creating a culture of trust. That was the point. The slave culture had trust ripped out of it. That's what you do, slave owner, right? So everybody's just operating in a really short time period of how do I get through the day, and that kind of thing is trying to stretch thought process. Toussaint's amazing, dude. Anyway, so run into it all the time. Ask the question is, why would I care about this? There's a good reason for it. So that's I think what makes cultures.
And so what would you do different? What do you think is going wrong with today's society, with what you see from the outside or what you see just on the things that you're involved in, that is missing today around that?
You say today's society, that's zooming out quite a bit. You mean just society writ large?
Yeah.
The civil discourse, as opposed to finger pointing. There's so much demonization of another point of view, as opposed to seeking a surprising solution. I'll give you another great book, Principles by Ray Dalio.
Yep.
Super book. And that one really taught me a lot. So there's some similarities because he was super smart, he was young and stuff, and then he crashed and burned and blew up his company and learned conquering of hubris over time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really resonated for me was this: it's only interesting to discover where you're wrong, because that's the only way to grow. And so seek out people that are believable. In other words, they have some reason why you might believe they're smart, they've experienced, they're whatever. Some reason why you might be interested in what they've got to say, that disagree with you, and try to figure out where you're wrong. You may discover they're wrong, but if you come at it from, they must know something I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Being open to that is difficult.
It is, because you got, especially if it's something you feel passionate about.
Yeah.
We talk about follow your passion. The ancient Greeks talked about passion as being the most dangerous thing out there. It was going to cause you to kill somebody. Passion was a bad thing. So there was a mechanism that funnily resulted in a terrible thing called a dialectic, Marx and Engels. And the idea was you have an idea, the thesis, you have an opposite idea, an antithesis, and you push them against one another, and you try to create a different thing called a synthesis that is not just an average. It's not just like compromise.
Yep.
It's a new creation that's better than the both in some different dimension of thinking. They came up with Marxism out of this, which is terrible, but the dialectic is still a very valuable idea. So if you come at it that, you're a right-wing Republican and a left-wing Democrat, or you're pro-life versus pro-choice, that's a good one, because there, all you're going to do is beat each other up into some sort of a number in between. How many weeks until we can have it, or whatever. You can see how terrible that discourse has been going.
Yep.
But if you're approaching it from the perspective of together as a team, we're going to create a synthesis that neither of us can imagine today. There we go. There's your answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
Yeah. It's not about you. Stop making it about you.
Yeah. And we as a team of opposites will create a synthesis that neither of us can imagine without the other. Yeah, there's the statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Super powerful.
That's what I'm looking.
Oh, love it. So take a pivot on today in your personal journey that you've experienced in your professional realm. What has been to this day the most difficult moment that you've had? Can you recall that? Or the toughest? It may not be gruesome or evil or bad, but just the hardest.
So when I met you, when we started that program together, I entered that program with two intentions. One, an ultimate intention is I wanted to push myself to a limit. Christina will always joke that you have to be very careful when you ask the universe for a challenge. You'll get the challenge you didn't want instead of the one you were hoping for.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. And the other one was to try to get control over my own brain. I probably would be diagnosed as ADD these days, I guess, throughout my life. I always felt like my mind wanted to be interested in what it wanted to be interested in. It wasn't the chemistry book I'm supposed to study right now. It was everything else. And that is still absolutely constant item. So I wanted to get a control over that. I didn't get that out of that. But the challenges then, and then the challenges that then ensued. They included all the medical challenges that she had and all of that. And that was, holy shit. And then the stress of that, plus thinking I knew more than I knew, a little hubris stuff, resulted in screwing up some real estate work that I was doing and not quite going bankrupt, and then so someone who was born and raised to be the chosen one, all being master of time, space, and dimension, being wrong over and over and over and over, fail, till you finally are like, am I right about anything?
Yeah.
Real crisis.
Yeah. So as you went through these moments.
Keep chugging, keep going.
Well, and you've never stopped.
Mm-hmm. And that would be something proud of. I never gave up, never stopped, kept searching for an answer, kept reading books.
Yeah.
Kept reading books. Who's got a thing I need to know?
Yeah.
That I'm missing?
So here's the question. Who would you identify as the people in your life that help you get through it during those moments? That has a significant impact in you, not giving up, helping you provide direction or directive in making certain decisions that you would attribute to?
I have to answer that two ways. One way is I don't ask for help enough. I've got this ridiculously awesome group of people that I don't reach out to when I should. There's a lesson right there.
Yeah.
You brought that up the other time. I've been thinking about it ever since. Should reach out more because I've got very, very fortunate in that regard. So I try to solve it all myself.
Yeah.
So that's half the answer. The other half was Christina. She's always able to think of things in a different way than I am. And always 100% support. Always. And then there's just some of my older friends that I talk to. Mm-hmm. There's Brian Swedberg, Brian Oakley, there's yourself, there's Andy Greenwald. These are really close people to me that always have something sage to say to me whenever I am thinking about something or struggling through something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, that's the thing. I've got such a group that I don't make nearly the use of that I must.
And it's
So it's this huge wasted possibility here.
yeah. If it's the one commitment that I could tell you that I have always tried to be consistent on and making sure is that the people in my life are reminded of that. Because I absolutely agree with you. It is underutilized. And I do believe everybody has everyone that they need. They're just not asking for help.
Yeah.
So through these moments, I love technology, although I'm not good at it, but I love technology. My favorite quote is, and I look at it and I listen to it, and people who are in my world, I bring it up frequently. Systematize everything that's predictable so that you can humanize everything that's exceptional. It's identifying the areas that you are able to, that are repetitive. Mm-hmm. And then once you see them, then identify, at least ask the question is, how can I replace it with some form of technology so that I am here with where I need to be? Mm-hmm. Where does that show up in those moments of difficulties and complexities?
Systematizing is something I've been working on. It's funny, I sit there and talk about process and all that kind of stuff. I was Mr. Anti-process for the longest time. Any documented process just seemed like a restriction to free thinking.
Totally see that.
It was
But in itself, that is a process.
bad luck. I think I've lost the question already. Getting lost in this concept about process versus.
The question was around, in those moments of complexity or difficulty, where did you find yourself engaging in technology or automation that helped you get through it?
I don't think I did very much.
Okay.
I think I kept improvising too much,
Okay.
which made it difficult. Improvising has an advantage because it leaves you open to ideas.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, like I mentioned, the idea of being between two groups that are arguing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very improvisational place.
Sure.
To be comfortable.
And yet you created the Dan,
Right. Yeah.
which was the technology
The technology to do that kind of a thing. Yeah.
that created a moment of identifying repetition that is now automated so people can communicate effectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, by the way, there's a contribution to this world. Just want to make note of that. All right. So the last question in that element of in this segment is, looking back and in retrospect, what experiences that can you reflect on that while going through it seemed really shitty, but now you could say that I'm blessed that I actually went through it because it is who and what made me today?
The improvisational mistakes that I made financially in the past, where I was overconfident in being right, kind of a consistent theme, overconfident in being right, made mistakes and lost with not giant amounts of money.
Yeah.
I'm in better shape financially now, so I can deploy resources now without those errors.
Yep.
And I think with both the big vision and the structure and discipline that comes of experience, that's an example there.
Okay.
I tried very hard to create freedom and creativity in my teams. These different organizations have radically different ways of their thinking about going about them. All pretty darn interesting. All have strengths and weaknesses. So I was brought aboard on Sierra Space to be in charge of their avionics and power. So that means command and data handling, so core computers that control everything. Mm-hmm. Communications, the radios and optical back and forth to Earth. Guidance, navigation, and control. So, way you are, which is way more complicated than you might guess initially. Power, so electrical, solar cells and batteries, and then harness, which is all the wires. It's astonishing how much wiring. But yeah, these were areas I didn't know a lot about, frankly. So jumped into that and had to learn all those 5 areas, manage this diverse team on several locations, and get to preliminary design review, which we did last year.
Okay. Got it. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. I really appreciated not only the conversation, I also appreciated the fact that I got to learn much more about my friend that I've ever known, and the ability to integrate it in how to look at business in a different perspective.
Good.
And so it was awesome. So thank you for today.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jason.
Appreciate it.